Hello and welcome back to the Handstandcast. I am Emmet Lewis and I'm here with my co-host Mikael Christiansen.
Hello.
How's it going, Mikael?
Not too bad. Finally got back to Sweden. Been in Norway for like 2 months. I was actually in my hometown for. It's the longest since I moved out when I was 19. So it was kind of funny to actually be there for like an extended period of time.
Ah, cool.
Even though it was pretty boring. But hey,
I know.
that's life now.
I don't know, people kind of following possibly on Instagram. We're still if you're listening to this at some time in the future, we're still in the midst of the corona outbreak. And Mikael fled to the north to escape the virus while I locked myself in my apartment in Dublin.
Not that far north. It's just in the mountains, and yeah, it's still snow there, and it's still kind of like about like below zero at night and stuff. So like now back in Stockholm here, I'm looking out the window and like the leaves on the trees are like there are leaves on the trees. Like it hasn't even started in my hometown yet. So I was pretty happy to actually just get the hell out of there.
Yeah, I think some of the videos you posted when it was like, I think we were having 20 degrees here in Dublin, and Mikael's on his story is hacking ice away from his driveway with an axe.
Yeah, like but that ice is there still. It's thick. Like there's not that much left now, but they're like if you go 20 minutes from my home, like from the kind of city area, or you can't even call it a city, but if you go kind of a little bit further out, there are still like meters of snow.
Wow.
And it never ends. So
Never-ending snow.
I'm happy to have finally left now.
Cool. So let's get on a bit of topic. So this
Yes.
is meant to be a mini-sode, but as usual in our mini-sodes, they'll probably always run over. Who cares? It was also meant to be the last episode of season 1. And I have to say, the podcast we set out, we're just going to try it out as a bit of an experiment to see,
Yeah.
do people enjoy it? And the uptake and everyone out there in listener land has been fantastic. The feedback we're getting, we can tell you guys are enjoying it. So we decided, you know what? We're just going to keep rolling and we're not going to finish season 1. We're just going to have indefinite season 1 till we need to take a break. We had a bit of a chat today about all the other kind of topics and other stuff we're going to cover. Just if you're listening out there and you have an idea for an episode or questions as normal, you can send them into us on Instagram or on the contact form on the main website. We're open to suggestions, obviously, because we need to keep things fresh, and we'll keep going till we get bored, I suppose, and take a break and then come back. But over to Mikael. What do you think of the whole podcasting thing? It's a bit strange. It's cool, but
It's been interesting. Of course, first of all, me and you, we were basically in the highest risk group of making a podcast. Like both kind of white dudes in our 30s. So, like it just has to happen.
I've seen somewhere online with someone going like, when I run into people I haven't seen in a long time, I just ask them how's their podcast going, and I'm so far 100% with people going, oh yeah, it's going good.
Yeah, but it's interesting since to me it's I've never really thought about doing a podcast. I like to talk, obviously, but yeah, it's been turning out better than I thought. Since it's kind of just this stream of consciousness kind of thing anyway, and we take up things that we obviously have thought a lot about for very many years. And yeah, I'm surprised on like all the positive feedback on it. Like a lot of people gotten back to me saying like, yeah, this thing you said, it was great. And like, oh yeah, well, that's cool. I don't know what we talked about. I still haven't listened to anything that we actually did. So I'm just happy that people are finding it like more all right than terrible.
It's a podcast has been rated by Spotify as not very terrible. Excellent. So with the team of the minisodes, we have a few questions as usual, and we'll ramble, I suppose, a bit, but let me pull up our questions today. So our first question, this is a good one actually, so I put it first, is where does all the knowledge come from? It's so well structured and thought through.
Where does it come from? I guess our information processors. I think that, of course, between us, we do have quite many years of experience of both, like as practitioners and as teachers.
Yeah, I think between us in terms of coaching years, there's probably about 20 to 25 years of coaching experience.
something like that. Yeah.
there's that
I
across.
think I thought. I mean, when I look back on it, kind of my teaching experience, because to me, teaching it's a people's job, it's a people job. Like it's something, it has to do with like relating to other people, and of course, like the specific kind of wordings and theory behind it is important, but also being able to see people as humans and seeing them where they are in their process and so on is important. And I started, the first teaching I did was when I was doing karate when I was I started it when I was 14, and I became absolutely obsessed. It was, for those who know the karate styles, it was Tani Hashidoryu. And I was doing that for a few years in my hometown, and I was so obsessed and so into it. It was kind of the first thing I discovered. That and magic cards were the two like first things that
Magic and
actually
karate
mattered in my life. And then like the teacher or the two teachers at the club, they saw that I was really into it, and they needed someone to kind of be like assistant trainer when they couldn't and stuff, because they had families and they were older than us kids. So when I was around 16, they asked me to be assistant teacher, and I knew all the theory and all the stuff like past my level. So I was teaching the group, like, of course, like not very advanced things, but teaching the things I could. So I got used to kind of a teacher's role from early on, I guess. And then I was teaching breakdancing for a bunch of years in Oslo to kids. And I think that has kind of led me to be very analytical about how things actually work. And when I got into circus school too, I was 23, so I was like, damn, okay, this is a bit like, I felt the kind of classical thing you do in your 20s. Oh no, it is too late. I am probably never going to get good. So like I was kind of stressing about it, and I started reading and nerding out on figuring out how I could kind of optimize it. And I mean, optimizing is good to a degree, and I'm not that big of a fan of it anymore because it just leads you to stress out over things you can't control. But I mean, it did teach me a lot of things. So I think that like just having done that, I taught my first handstand workshop in 2010. But I mean, there were no handstand workshops around. There was a guy named Cole Dano from Helsinki who invited me over to teach a workshop at his yoga studio, and I put together something. And when I look back at what I did back then, it was like some of it was all right, but I was sharing way too much information. Like the people I taught there, they didn't need to hear even, maybe they needed to hear 50% of what I said. So then I kind of like, how to say, but they liked it, so I got to teach a couple of more workshops there, and then kind of expanded beyond that. And then when I met you and Elise and like had like Handstand Factory and so on, like it kind of course took off more. But it's just that having done it a bunch of times and kind of this kind of it's a classical science. You have a thesis, and then you have an antithesis, and then you create your synthesis, and then you keep going like that until you kind of come up with more efficient ways on average, at least. So I think it's just been like primarily then like the kind of drive and the interest in figuring out, okay, how does this work? How do I experience it? How do others experience it? And how can you kind of come to some sort of conclusion on how to practice then through meeting others?
Yeah, I think it's obviously there's the technical knowledge that I kind of picked up in circus school and my own personal training, my own desire to get better. But then in terms of actually structuring and teaching methodology, it's one of those things I can't remember. I had this realization one day that people just don't learn the same way. And it was actually like, it came, I think for myself, it came through our dance classes in circus school, where dance classes are only taught in one method. The teacher does the thing, and then you have to copy it within about 15 seconds of watching it. And there was no breakdown, there was no technical discussion. Whereas for me, I need to technically understand something to the minutiae before I can actually replicate it. And once I understand it, like it's very interesting. Like say when I was making routines or something, I'll just sit down, and I have a very strong visual kinesthetic capacity where I can just sit down and do something in my head very strongly, and then I can just replicate it physically. But if I don't understand what I'm doing, I can't go through my own process. So I had to come from realizing that, like, hold on, people can just visually interpret something and replicate, to go, oh, well, actually, I can't do that, to going, well, then there's different types of people. So then understanding of that and then putting that into practice of coaching and just aiming to, you know, I'll say it's very egotistic, but I like being right and I like proving to other people that I am right. Maybe not so much anymore that I'm a bit maturer, but when I'm like, okay, I can teach you to squat, I can get you the splits, I can get you a handstand. I want to be right. I don't want to thing, and it's not for the other person. It is obviously for the other person, but it's also, to satisfy the ego that I am right and that I could teach this person better than they were being taught before. So there's definitely a driver of that. And it's also just like there's a general dissatisfaction with myself in the crossover, the cross pollination of fields of coaching, where some schools of coaching are very good at doing one specific thing, and other places haven't recognized this and taken it over, whereas they kind of can be stuck in the ways. So I kind of was fortunate that I kind of personally straddle the realms of strength and performance coaching, technical acrobatics coaching, and just technical artistic coaching almost as well, and I can kind of draw from all these sources. So that's kind of, it gives me a unique perspective. I'm not a strength coach, I'm not an acrobatics coach, I'm something a bit different, I suppose. Kind of entwine.
One thing that you just said there that kind of reminded me of, I mean, with the visualizations and stuff like that, I mean, it is, of course, very powerful tools, but I just reminded me of something when I was younger. This was kind of when I was just kind of getting into this, and you get into it and you're super hyped and you learn something, and then you think this methodology or this whatever is the world, kind of this classical kind of NLP stuff where you get to learn that you just need to do these kind of secret tricks, and then suddenly you're about to learn much faster than everyone else and all that crap. Like, I was never like really that into that, but I had some friends who tried to kind of get me into as this, or present it as if this was kind of the way forwards, and I picked into and dabbled a little bit with a few of those things, but then kind of just ended up seeing like, well, it's certainly like, for me at least, it certainly helps me to understand what I'm doing. But what I saw is with, for example, like you say, with this visualization, is that like it works for me to a degree, but I became for a period of time the guy that spent a lot of time thinking that I had to kind of understand and micromanage every little detail, and if it wasn't good enough, then there wasn't any point training it. Like this kind of this general idea that you have to do the first repetition perfectly, or else you're kind of training bad motor patterns or like wrong technique and all this stuff. And there is certainly merit to it in some regards, but I spent so much time on that, like especially back in my breakdancing days when I was learning flares, like the regular flares. I eventually got really good flares, but that happened when, instead of trying to do two perfect ones, because I had a friend of mine and he had like the world's most awesome looking flares, the super long legs, and he just looks like he's a fucking flying machine when he does it. And I thought I have to do it like that, and I made this mistake that kind of I rationalized that he can do good flares because his technique is exactly like that, while his technique is really exactly like that because he has done so many flares in his life, and he could do 25 flares. Of course he could fly, while I could do 5 at my best, and I expected my first 2 to be perfect. So kind of when I switched around that and going more from this, I visualize and micromanage every detail to just learn like it. Then when I could do 18 flares, sure, then I could actually do it pretty well. So people certainly learn differently in those regards, or need different tools, kind of.
Yeah, like, just on people saying, don't get me wrong, I still need to have this kinesthetic sense of it. Like, that's an interoception based process, but you still just need to grind out 1,000 reps. Like, 10,000 reps is your mother basis of all skills. Like,
plain
everything.
simple.
You want to juggle 5 balls? Try 10,000 times. You will be able to juggle 5 balls. I
remember a friend of mine, like, he's actually the musician of the new show that I'm going to create, the Vald, with the Right Way Down company that we founded a few months, or like about a year ago. And the musician of that, like, he's a circus artist, and he's done a lot of partnering acrobatics, a lot of like dance acrobatics and stuff. And I remember he told me, like, when he kind of like transitioned out of being as much of a stage performance in terms of acrobatics and wanted to do more music, he just said, like, music isn't easy, but it's easier than circus because you don't get tired. You can just practice all day, every day. And he went from just like being able to play some chords on the ukulele to composing his own music. And of course, that's not saying that that is easy at all. It's just that, like, you don't have this kind of like your shoulders are literally busted and you can't do another rep. Well, you can play more on your instrument or work on your vocals or whatever. And hence, like, he improved super fast.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely one of those things. It's just like, yeah, repetition is the mother of skill. It's just getting to the point where you're confident enough in your repetitions, I suppose, and getting other people, I suppose, to the point where they're confident to do the skill. Because I think a huge amount of the knowledge and other stuff I have is just to back up the actual practice. That I can say, you need to do this. Here's, if someone needs 20 pages of reasons, I'll give them 24 pages of reasons. But at the end of the day, the practice is informed by the theory, not dictated by the theory.
Yeah.
And that's very important.
That's a very good way to say it. Informed by and not dictated. That is actually, and I guess, like, circling that back to the question too, I think that is, I would say that I feel is part of why this stuff is structured reasonably well, is that we of course we have a lot of technical knowledge that we could explain it with. In fact, like, we could put so much more into all of those programs and fiddly diddly stuff that isn't necessary, especially when it comes to kind of anatomical variations and la la la, but it's not necessary. Like, and I think that is kind of something that internet has kind of done a little bit of or made like a certain obsession about, like, having to find out all the details and then thinking that once you do, then you'll be able to do it better, or there is some sort of secret knowledge or all that. Like, there is very little of that. There is like a chunk of knowledge that you need to have, and I think that what we've tried to do is to structure it around the idea that you need to be informed by it, but not you can't go into each and every set of whatever you're doing and thinking about all those details, because you are literally wasting your brain power thinking while you need to sense what the hell is going on.
Yeah, definitely that kind of idea of just like, yeah, if you're thinking, you're by definition wasting energy on something that could be spent on the skill. And there's one thing, like, just on a segue slightly, it's what I do with a lot of the people I work closer with, is I give them cues and sensations they will experience or experiences they will have as a cue, not because I expect them to replicate it, but for when it happens to them that one time, it's a freak quarter of a second kind of something happens, they have a vocabulary to describe it, and not, not like that I expect them, on a one arm, say one person, they need to push up, separate the ear from the shoulder, controversial, and push towards the center. And then when they feel that happen, they go, oh wait, I was unbalanced for that 1/4 second. And I was like, okay, now you know what happened. Now you felt what I explained. You can link up the theory with the experience, and you have an actual learning model there.
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's like, for example, one thing I very often say is this: like, you need to keep the weight in the center of your hand. Like, people ask me where, like, yeah, well, where is your weight in one arm? Around the fleshy part of the thumb, I usually say, but it's never going to be there. And I think, like, several people that I've been teaching even lately that have had an idea about this sensation they're looking for, an idea that doesn't really correlate with what reality is. And that's where, if you imagine that, like, when I say, yeah, you need to keep the weight around the fleshy part of your thumb, then you like, an inexperienced mind in that context might then say, oh, balancing a one arm means I need to have the weight there. No, it doesn't mean that. It means that, like, this is the sensation on average you're looking for. But the big issue, as we've discussed also in Push Harder and all that stuff, is that, like, you by definition won't be efficient the first couple of 100 times you do the one arm. It's going to travel all over the place. But as you say, like, that person might be feeling, hey, I was there for a fraction of a second, that kind of felt right somehow, and they have something to associate to. So having that and like building the kinesthetic map, and then having certain concepts to connect to those feelings that you get, I think is definitely a way forwards in a lot of those things.
Yeah, I think we have kind of lost focus on the question, but I think we covered some of it. But
That's what we do here.
as I said, we ramble. It's what we do. We like the sound of our own voice. I'm going to move on to the next question just to keep us kind of running. So this one's a pretty straightforward one. Endurance. What are good ways or the best way to build handstand endurance? Currently at 45 seconds max hold freestanding.
Yeah, what would you say, Emmet Lewis?
What would I say? This is one of the things. It comes down to endurance in this kind of zone. You are still slightly in a strength endurance zone. So you have to look at, like, if you're doing a straight handstand, you have to start looking at shapes that would push your underbalance capacity. So tuck, pike, these kind of things. Building the upper back strength so you just have more raw strength will translate to more endurance here. But it's also like you have to look at how hard you're using the fingers. Like, are you doing 45 seconds where you're squeezing the ground for all your life for that 45 seconds? Is your placement too far forward so you're leaning onto the fingers? Or, are you on a thing where your line is stacked nicely and you are just using the fingers as and when they need it? These are things that will just make your balance more efficient. If we can make it more efficient, then you will balance longer. Other than that, it really does come down to like doing more work and fatigue. This is the thing with endurance. You have to fatigue yourself a bit in your sets.
Sure. There is one thing that I find kind of nice for. It works much better for two arms, or it doesn't really maybe even work for one arms, but I guess it can. But for two arms at least, I think that like you said, like if you first of all figure out like, okay, is it your shoulders that start sinking that'll move you too far into underbalance and you drop? Is that kind of where your weakness lies, or is it just a grip strength that your forearms just burn too much and you just lose it from there? Figuring that out can be a good thing to just as a baseline, knowing what you mainly need to work on. And one thing that I like to do in terms of that is to if you like, let's say you work if it's your underbalance then that struggles and you like your shoulders drop too much in the end, you basically do your endurance set with the stomach to wall. So like it means you set up in a freestanding handstand a little bit away from the wall, not too far, but you're in full balance for as long as you can. And then as you start to cave in, your shoulders will start dropping and you can't hold anymore. Well, then you let your feet go on the wall and you're able to stay up there and kind of, as you say, fatigue yourself slightly more. And you can do the exact same thing with the, if it's your forearm that this just gets too tired, is you do it back to wall instead. You keep your endurance set, and then as you finish, like as you can't hold balance anymore, you push yourself a slightly further by then you let yourself, for example, fall to the wall, and then you from there work on heel pulls. So you just like add 5 or 10 or something of heel pulls to your actual endurance set, just to be able to kind of get yourself into that overload stage. And when it comes to endurance, there's 2 more things that I think is important, and one of them is that like you need to think about like why you're doing the endurance, and it's a classic one. This, I need to have the minute, because on internet they say that the minute is a nice number. This is kind of questionable in one sense. Of course, it's a good baseline and it tells you something about your endurance, but like 59 seconds isn't a failure. So just like,
no, 59 seconds is a failure.
Huh?
59 seconds is a failure. If you fall out at 59 seconds, you've failed and you're a bad person.
Yes, then you need to buy our new program. It's
How to get from 59 seconds to 60 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be the very special program that brings you there. It's also going to get you rich real fast. By the way, Emmet, this this is a complete digression now, and I'll go back to my point straight after. But my newest obsession is watching all these get rich scams on YouTube. I watched all of them, and it's absolutely hilarious. They are fucking idiots. It is incredible. There's like 100 guys that are doing like the same marketing tactic, and they're selling like become rich fast schemes. Like these have existed forever, but I just came across so many, so I've binged watched everything and watched all the details. That London Real guy is also among them. He's also doing the same shit.
Yeah.
However, to get me back to the point I had, what was it? It was about endurance.
Handstands, they won't make you rich anytime soon, but you can stand on your hands.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can cash in your seconds upside down. What was I was supposed to say? It was something about endurance. I lost it. Of course, I lost it.
It's okay. I think we answered the endurance.
Endurance is important, but yeah, don't waste all your time only pushing for like. I mean, if you can stand on your hands for 2 minutes, it's fine. You don't really need much more unless you just really want to kind of the achievement for reaching a certain other number.
Yeah, it's also just one thing. Just when you're getting to the stage of doing 30 to 40-second handstands, like it is the time you should be looking at expanding your balance capacity. You know, working on all the different shapes, working on press preparations, working on moving in shapes, these things, because what happens a lot of the time with people I train is like that's about the stage when we introduce all this stuff. They'll just send me a video one day going like, oh look, I can hold for 60 seconds and I didn't even notice. Like we just don't make it a thing. But because we've increased their capacity, their horizontal capacity on balance, then the pyramid just gets higher, like their total endurance. So it's one thing just like if you chase it directly, it can be a very indirect path, where if you chase it indirectly, it can be a very direct path to it. And it's a, you know, it's a thing.
And it just ends up being kind of like an accidental result. You just build, like I would say, rather than chasing the minute, when you've passed 30 seconds, 40 seconds or so, build a strong handstand practice. Like learn the various movements and like move on to more complicated things such as pressing, and you'll suddenly see, hey, I'm like at 50 seconds already, and then you just need a couple of sessions and you can do it. While if you only keep pushing for this certain time, you're constantly fatiguing yourself. Now I remember the other point that I was going to make too, which is very obvious and very blatant. If you're working endurance work, you need recovery because you're by definition wanting to put yourself into fatigue. So don't make the mistake of having like a 6 days a week handstand practice, and then you work loads of endurance on day 3. Like you're dead on day 4, but you're still training. You're training day 5. You're training day 6, and like your opportunity for actually recovering from that is going to be decreased.
Yeah, actually, just on that note, to plug a book, there's a book by Thomas Kurz. I can't remember the exact title. In fact, I'll just open it up right now because it is about training for athletes and how to lay out the training week. Yeah, here we go. Science of Sports Training, How to Plan and Control Training for Peak Performance. This is an excellent book for the people who are a bit more into coaching out there, because it gives a layout to how you should structure things in the week in terms of when does your heavy skill work go, where you're working on like really high skill things, where does your skill work that still requires strength go, where does your strength work, and where does your endurance work go in the training week, and how much rest you need between them, and how they kind of, one will affect the other and decrease performance in one, and one will do it. So just, it's an excellent book. Anything by Thomas Kurz is excellent, so check him out. I think it's stadion.com. You can get it
in the link.
Yeah, we'll put it in the transcript anyway, but it's for coaches, it's invaluable just to get an idea of like, okay, what are we doing this week? Particularly when you're looking at things like, okay, we have physical capacity, but we have skill capacity, and we have other things we're working on. So not to just wreck yourself on day one by doing too much of something, and then you can't train the other thing later in the week. Cool. I think that covers it. Let's move on to, here's a question. Head position. Please could you discuss head position in handstands? I'd have thought that the ideal would be to keep the cervical spine in alignment with the rest of the spine, but often on your Instagram photos, heads are right back, presumably to see the floor and help with balancing. Elsewhere, and they name another handstand, I don't know, their school of calisthenics, I've seen the recommendation to look at the ground through your eyebrows. I'm paraphrasing, they didn't mention eyebrows, to avoid hoiking the head back?
Oh yeah, that's a classic question. Stop making the head position such a big deal. That is my first thing to say. But like you need to kind of, or at least how I see it is you need to view the entire thing about the head from a completely different perspective. Like your head, like the let's say now looking at the floor is the default setting for doing hand balancing of any like higher level skill. So that is the main thing that matters, and then you just put your head in a comfortable position where you see the floor and you don't need to think about your head, because this is the primary thing. And you'll see like there, like the kind of looking through eyebrows thing I've seen, I think that's been popularized by gymnastics, and I would assume that in gymnastics there is I haven't done high level gymnastics myself at all.
I'd coach that one, just looking at your eyebrows, keeping the head in, just for people who are going on to like handstand forward rolls and stuff like that. So the head is already actually almost in the curve, and it's a very small movement to get it out of the way. But that's the technical reason.
I would assume that it kind of makes sense as well in terms of flips and all that shit that and like back handsprings, that you don't want to throw the head first and all that stuff.
Yeah. So it's kind of one of those cues that gets shifted over. But
yeah, and like looking through your eyebrows is fine, but it means, like, to me, it just means that that is a more strenuous position, because I'll have a less view of the floor, and I kind of need to actively tuck my head a little bit in between my arms, and I see no point in it. And you'll hear loads of people telling you that if you have the kind of the head in front and you look down, it is by definition bad. Well, then I highly recommend you to look at hand balancers such as Miguel Santana, Andrei Bondarenko, Andrei Muraru, Yuval Ayalon, me, etc., 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 etc. Loads of, like, almost all pro hand balancers have the head in front, so they have a good view of the floor. All of the people I just mentioned have really great lines and really good technique and all that, so there's no problem. It's even to the degree that when, like, I was teaching in a circus school in Netherlands, in Rotterdam. There is one girl there. She has kind of the head in look through eyebrows thing when she does one arms. She's really good. And I was like, oh, damn, that's kind of the first time I've ever seen it. It's that rare for like people that have, like, she's like serious high level, and she does that. And that's fine. Like, it's just, it's definitely not a necessary thing. So like just find the kind of head position that you're fine with. And the idea that, like, the head in front of the body should make you arch, well, then you can stand on your feet and look to the ceiling and just notice how your head is an independent moving unit from your thoracic spine, so it doesn't need to move.
Yeah, basically. It's one of those things. It's like, particularly with the shoulder position, we try to coach into people based on the principles. Like, the head movement should be able to dissociate from the shoulder positioning quite freely, either forward and backwards. So if we think, obviously, in the more advanced levels, the chin on chest work, where you kind of have, like, there's 3 base head positions, which are going to be different, slightly different for everyone. Look at the floor, look at the wall through your hands, and look up to your toes. So these would be the 3 head positions we kind of work with a lot. But we're doing them to train the closing of the shoulders and to train the shoulder position, but also to dissociate it so the shoulders develop their own platform. And from that, like, the shoulders should be basically, they're the pyramid of the handstand, the base of the pyramid, and everything should be built on top of it. And once you have a good shoulder position, then you should have freedom in the legs, you should have freedom in the head. And obviously, just like, it messes with your visual system, your visual balancing system a bit. But in general, it's, as Mikael says, like, what works for you and what's comfortable, do that.
I think that, like, just to mention also, in terms of these 3 head positions, like the head through, like the chin on chest when you look into the ceiling, this has a lot to do with the fact that you move the weight of the head into under balance, which forces your shoulders to flex slightly more to be able to keep the alignment. So it has a lot of kind of mechanical uses in that sense, and it's quite a good tool to develop the alignment and so on. Looking forwards, as they do in capoeira and stuff, is actually, like, the head position for hand balancing I find the least useful. It's fine to do, and you can do it on one arm and so on, but, like, it doesn't contribute with anything significant other than just making it slightly harder to balance. However, for either artistic purposes or capoeira and stuff like that, or breakdancing, if you want to look at the guy you're battling or so on when you do a freeze, fine. But for the purposes of balancing, looking at the floor will give you the most information about where you are at. And perhaps most importantly, it means that when you fall over or when you fall, you don't need to move your head to see the floor to orient yourself where you are in space before putting the legs on the floor. Like, you see it immediately. So there is one coordination to bring yourself safely down when you're a beginner, compared to if you're looking up or forwards, your weight goes over, you start falling, you need to reorient and move your head first and then your legs. So it's just a slower process for you to be safe. So that it's like, especially when you're up high on things and stuff like that, you really want to see where you're at so you can orient your body in space in case of falling.
Yeah, I think that kind of covers it. Next question, straightforward one. How long would you recommend holding a straddle L sit to have a good base for stalders? I'd say it's one of those ones. I can probably find you people who can hold a straddle L sit for 10 seconds but can do a few reps of a solder, but they have a very good high straddle L that's been set up with the correct protraction and depression of the shoulders and have strong compression, but it's very heavy for them. Generally, I'd say 30 seconds is pretty good, though. You should be shooting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 30 seconds is just a safe bet. It's not that hard to build, and then you know that you have more than enough kind of to be able to do it. Just what you need to look out for when you do that straddle L is you want to sit high on your arms with the legs so that the inner thigh is connected to about just above your elbow, because if you're sitting low, then your shoulder blades will be popping out and you'll be in the type of position where you can't really exert, like, or you're lower in the range than in the straddle L where you're actually pressing from. So yeah, 30 seconds in a good straddle L is more than enough, though. Yeah, 10 seconds should be enough if the rest of the press is very strong. But yeah, 30 is a good baseline.
Cool. And here's a stalder question to link up with that one. Once you've learned to make one rep stalder consistently, how would you recommend to get more reps in a row? Well, this kind of depends on how you got your stalder press. So in the press program, we divide the press into two distinct motions: the press from standing, high pressing, and the press from the L sit or the straddle L position, low pressing. If you trained it the way we've got, by the stage you get to come to linking them, you're probably able to do 3 to 5 repetitions of each section. So then it's just a matter of like building endurance in it. The way I would program this most of the time is once someone can do one sufficient quality rep of a stalder, and it's not just like an all out, I can do this once a month when I'm completely fresh and the moon cycle is correct, and I've been blessed by the priests of the internet. But once I can kind of do it every now and then I would generally set like a 15-minute AMRAP. What I'm looking for on this generally is I want you to do, once people get up to the stage of doing 12 repetitions in that 15 minutes, then I can start setting programming that would be like, okay, I want you to do 3 sets of 3 to 5 repetitions, 2 to 3 normally actually. And then we go, okay, we can look at it if we do, say they're doing 12 reps in 15 minutes, and then I set a program which is 5 sets of 2 to 3 reps, so that will give us 15 reps over the target time. But now you're beginning to link them together. That would be my way of doing it. I'm sure other people would have other ways.
Yeah, like the one thing as well, just in terms of like specific exercise wise, the funny thing with getting more stalders is also like it's a really fatiguing. It's a long motion, so that like you're getting yourself out the straddle L through the planche part, past your hands, like you're still like getting to straddle handstand, closing your legs, opening your legs, go all the way back down and then back up. Like it takes a while to do one. So a few things that I've been employing, like when I was working to get past 10, was that I would do like, because where I would fatigue was just like on like the lift from the straddle L and into kind of the standing position. So I would just like, I would stop closing my legs on the top, I would press to just a straddle handstand and go back down again, because it just saved me, like, this, even not a lot, like it just saved me half a second or so on each, or one, right, let's say it saved me 2 seconds on each rep, which by rep 12 starts actually mattering quite a lot. So that was one thing that really helped me. And also I think for people that are on like just getting their second one, I think like smashing through one, get to handstand and control, and then you do like a range of motion press on the second rep. And especially like if you're able on your second rep to be able to lower past your hands to slightly and back up, then you're starting to get close to doing 2, since the beginning, as you said, like it depends entirely on where your weakness in the press is. But if you're able to kind of crack the mid part of the press on the second rep, then you're really starting to get close to it.
Yeah.
Also, like as we do in the press program with the L to standing exercise, I think like if you're able to do 10 of those in a row, I mean, it's just a very safe bet. You will go, and if you can do 10 of those in a row and you can do 1 stalder, you can easily do 2 stalders.
Yeah.
Just mathematics.
There's one exercise I like to use, actually, the Straddle is in there at this kind of stage when people can do 1 stalder, but they can't do 2. Is I want them to do 2 eccentrics per set. So how this would work in practice, you would press from standing to a straddle handstand, lower down into an eccentric stalder, press back up, and then lower down again. So we're getting 2 eccentrics. We're getting 1 press, or 2 high presses, 2 eccentrics, and 1 stalder in a set, essentially. Yeah. And particularly because like by the time you get to doing stalder, your standing press should be quite strong, hopefully. Hopefully.
Yeah, for sure.
So it kind of gets you a bit more of everything. Right, next question. Okay, for you. 1-arm handstand, falling towards the support side. How to save with the free arm, lift or lower?
Falling to which side?
I think they mean they're falling to the outside.
So towards flag?
Towards the flagging direction, not towards the back towards center.
But didn't he say support side? Or maybe I misheard.
Yeah, 1-arm handstand falling towards the support side. How to save with the free arm, lift or lower? So I
think he actually means falling inwards. I mean, I would assume that like support side would be where the supporting arm is.
No, I think that means the straight arm. This is the thing. In the concise terminology, we should put out a manifesto on the internet that everyone must refer to their 1-arms in this exact manner, and this is the only acceptable way.
I'll cover both then.
Yeah,
just to be sure, if you're falling towards the flag side, that is actually the least complicated part in sense, because it's just about power, really. Because if you are on 1 arm and your legs start going too far into kind of a flaggy motion and you start losing it outwards, there's a couple of strategies you can do. One is like the main one you want to do regardless of is you keep the pressure in the shoulder, and you exactly in the same way as you do if you're standing on your hands and your legs start dropping towards kind of a press. You keep pressure through the shoulders, you pike at the hips, you catch the legs, and you bring them back up. That is the same you do in kind of when falling outwards in a 1-arm. The legs start dropping a little bit too far towards the floor. You press hard in the shoulder to re-establish the hand to hip connection, and then you bring the legs back up. Some people would want to bend their arm there to kind of bring themselves under, and like usually like people with a lot of like muscle will want to do it that way. Some people who are very, very flexible, they'll like keep the hand to hip line much straighter and just like kind of flex it in the sides much more. But there's also another, like you asked, like the question was like, what do you do with the free arm? If you're falling that way, you really want to kind of reach away from you with the free arm because you want to get weight on the other side, because your legs are dropping. Like let's say I stand on my right arm, legs drop towards the right, then I want to reach towards the left with my left arm so that I'm counterbalancing the weight of the legs moving outwards. So it's a rather simple procedure. It's definitely not intuitive in the beginning, and this takes a long time to kind of establish into the body. And sometimes those wobbles are very large, and sometimes they're like microscopic. But the falling inwards the other way, that is a problematic one, because if you, it's kind of funny there. I've seen, and I've experienced as well, like you stay, and if your legs drop too far towards a 2-arm handstand, meaning that the hip moves from a diagonal and they move into kind of a horizontal alignment, and you start dropping inwards, if you then like, there is very little you can do to kind of save it. The primary thing that you kind of do is that if I stand on the right arm, legs go too far inwards, what I need to do is I need to push the right arm really high so that I again establish that under my hip, and then I need to squeeze my left obliques, kind of pulling the leg towards my body, and it kind of is similar to when you move into a figa kind of position. And if any of you have ever tried a figa, then you know that it is a rather complex position, and hence doing this kind of counterbalance and this kind of control is really difficult. That is why we advocate having the diagonal hip placement depending on your body, because you'll be having a range in both directions, while when you're in a horizontal hip position, it's super hard to catch it. And the thing is, if people are in this diagonal placement and everything's going well, and they bend the free arm, I've seen, like, I call this waving to the queen, when people stand around and like they wave the hand back and forth. I came up with that because it was a British guy doing it, of course. But the idea then is that if you bring the arm inwards towards the arm you're standing on, you're actually moving the weight of your forearm and shoulder slightly that way, which has a tendency for people who are unexperienced. Again, I'm standing on the right arm. I bend my left arm towards the right arm. This moves more weight towards the right, which has a tendency to shoot my right shoulder out towards the right, which then makes my hip go too much into a horizontal placement, and I fall inwards. It's very kind of confusing. So what you want to do to avoid all these things is don't move that arm. Keep the free arm calm. Don't let it be kind of a reaction thing where it flails back and forth, waving to the queen to be able to keep you in balance. You want this arm to be calm and collected to the degree you can. And the only times you should move it for balance, ideally speaking, is when catching on the outside, when you fall into a flag, because then you will need it, while on the kind of inwards balancing, you don't actually need it. You need to learn to control this in your shoulder, and don't let the free arm kind of be a reactive mechanism, because it just creates a bigger feedback loop that very, very easily sends you out when it travels to the hip. That's a very long and very complicated answer, but I hope it helps.
Yeah. There's just to throw on a counterpoint slightly to this one, that it's a technique I have never used, but I met this guy. I was doing an audition for some circus company in Belgium many years ago. One of the hand balancers, one of the flyers in the company, or was he auditioning? I can't remember if he was auditioning or in the company already. And he's pretty good on one arm, pretty stable. I've never come across him since. I've forgotten his name. But his technique with the arm was to keep the arm high, immediately on the high arm, but then all his corrections were happening by bending at the elbow of the free arm. So he was like, it was kind of working like a pendulum, going from, like, you know, saluting yourself out to the side. And the arm was up at 90 degrees. And it was like, it was, you know, he was like a hand-to-hand flyer, but he was pretty good on, like, on one arm on the floor and on blocks. Wasn't the highest skilled, but he was good. He was very good. But this was his aggression, and I asked him a bit about it while we had some time, and he was saying this is how his teacher taught him. So I've nicknamed that the French corrections, but I'm not certain what school he is in or how he learnt, or if it was even sports acro or something. But just an interesting thing to try. I don't endorse it fully, but if it works for you, it works. It clearly worked for him, so.
It reminds me of something, like there was this one guy in my class in circus school named Bauz. He's a French acrobat, and he, like, in my class, basically everyone could do free headstands, like headstands without arms. I think we were, out of 17 people, I think like 14 could do a free headstand. Just because whenever anyone was injured, they would go to Batsugra, the Mongolian teacher, or to Sasha, my Russian handstand coach, and just ask him, can you give me some exercises? And they would give them the exercises, and which is rather straightforward to build the free headstand. So in the end, like, most people could do it, and like the technique for it, usually what people would do when they stand on a free headstand is like the arms will be straight and the legs will be straight, and to balance sideways they'll move from a straight arm and kind of bend it a little bit at the elbow to kind of help yourself to reestablish balance. And of course, the better you are, the less bending at the elbows, or less movement of the shoulders, and so on. But there was this one guy, Baus, because he would just do it on his own, and he was like a super good high-level acrobat. So he would just do it intuitively, and he would do the opposite. He would do a headstand with bent legs and bent arms, and then he would instead of bending an arm, bringing it towards you to counterbalance, he would go from the bent arm and just straighten it, or do the same with the legs. So he would just like literally have the polar opposite kind of balancing technique, and it worked. I mean, he could do free headstand on the floor, and it wasn't great, but he could do it. So it's interesting just how you can achieve the same thing. You're just like doing it with a totally different approach.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just on the free headstand, I have a group of my more dedicated hand balance focused people. We've been training this for the last month or so. I've decided to make them all learn it, because why not? And yeah, it's I was reviewing some of the proper old school vaudeville when headstands was really a thing, and if you look at the technique that a lot of them were doing, like say Bobby May, who we'll probably link in the thing, and other jugglers, is they had this kind of bent arms and leg technique. Even though they were all super flexible, they could do straight lines. Obviously, there's a bit of an aesthetic thing here as well, but they would they would be using this kind of like from a kind of semi-squat, sumo squat inverted position and straightening the legs, like you're saying, as their main correction. To put it in context, like these people were juggling 5 balls off drums. They were passing clubs between 2 people. They were doing it on tight wires, on elephants, on each other, So you can't say, oh yeah, we're better now and our technique is better. It's like, no, they're objectively better than most people who do the skill nowadays. So, maybe just because it's inelegant looking, the technique is better.
Right. Do you have any more?
No, that's the end of our questions for today, and we're also getting on to about an hour. So I suppose we should wrap it up. If you have survived listening to us this long, thank you so much. I just want to say thank you to everyone, I suppose, who helped make this a success and encouraged us along the way on the podcast. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been really cool. New experience to do all this. Speaking into a microphone has never been something that I've been doing before, but hey, if you're enjoying, we're both very happy, I guess.
Yeah, we're more than happy to keep going. Shout out if you want to learn how to handstand, how to one arm, how to press, how to do anything we do, please buy some of our programs from Handstand Factory. It's what keeps this thing running. Just I suppose to finish the season, I'd like to say thank you to all the people you don't see behind the scenes. So big thank you to Elisa, our chief whipcracker, producer, everything really. She
without Elise, and none of this would have actually gone on air.
Like literally none of it would have happened. So big shout out to Elisa for that. Shout out to Isaac for doing all our audio and editing. He's also one of our models that you see in some of the programs. He's always charmingly befuddled, so thank you, Isaac. Shout out to Sophie, who does all our graphics and all these things. Thank you, Sophie. She's fantastic. She's came on as an intern, but now works for us, and she's great. Who else do I thank? Jordan, who does the transcripting. Shout out to Jordan. He's a friend of mine from a different school of training, and he does the transcripts there. So I co-opted his fourth treasure of keyboard skills. And who else do we need to shout out? I can't remember. I think I've covered everyone. If not, shout out to Mikael and me, Mick Exotic and Bhagavan Emmet. Elisa told me not to say that, but she's away. Other than that, yeah, it's been a great, I don't know, we're not ending the first season, so it's been great. Thank you all for listening. We'll wrap it up there. Mick, do you want to say anything?
No, thanks. Speak to you next time, I guess.
Speak at you next time.
Yeah, speak at you.
See you and goodbye.
Right. Cheers. I'm just gonna push the, let's see.